Everyone, welcome to Brush Sauce Theater, the Contest 5. I'm Tyler Edlin, and I'm here with Adam Duff again, and we will be kind of talking about these entries for gameplay concept art.
Yes, awesome. How you doing?
And yeah, we're super excited to have these four. They're all very different, and they kind of have their own kind of what am I trying to say here? High points, and almost like they kind of diverged in terms of their objective, but we will kind of talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as you mentioned, I think they all on their own merits successful pieces of art.
Mm-hmm.
To varying degrees, and we can kind of break down and critique that process as well. But and this may be an issue that I had when I'm conveying the contest, that it was the role of a concept art, and this was a concept art contest. This one in particular, number 5, was to solve the gameplay space of the geometry I provided. And that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be either like a full painting, with all the most accurate and, intricate details of lighting and even texture. But it's just supposed to, even if you had the time to do that, that's just as valid in this situation as something as simple as a line drawing.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just wanted to make that clear. And I kind of organized the 4 of these into that type of mindset where these 2 on the bottom kind of hit that objective a little more accurately. They're selling the idea of this gameplay space. Like you could, just drop in a figure here and you could see kind of all the areas the player would be able to traverse, and maybe if there's, mechanical doors, it can start integrating the gameplay mechanics at this level. Whereas these 2 up top more sell the atmosphere of a scene, or maybe of a level as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's, and I'll just show mine for a quick peek on what I had to do the same thing as well. On both these levels, I had to do a market, for the city, and so this is the atmosphere, and that would fit right up top here. But after I completed this piece, they requested me to do something a little more in depth in terms of like the actual little streets, and it's like the Prince of Persia games, like how the player would traverse. This would be a first-person game, so you need to see how many kind of obstacles and how the heights relate to a player, and all that type of stuff. So then, that's when I had come up with this. So, yeah, 2 different objectives, but, it can be all artistic and, ways to express your creative energies. So we'll just kind of talk about them one by one now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and this art generally is all, I kind of have a little guide here, would be would be for internal use only, which means, like, they wouldn't take a piece of like the art I did here and throw that on a website and use it to market the game. That's kind of at the end here, and the public stuff, you build up the hype and everything. But generally the priority with this type of artwork is to do it quick and just explore the different ideas. So that it would be fit in on the top line.
Yeah.
So, okay, now we're all on the same page in terms of the context and everything. Let's go for it, Adam. How do you feel about this one right here, Peaceful Invasion?
Okay, well, my first impression is, if I put it in the game context, I see this as a mood piece, right?
Yeah, like it could be like a storyboard almost, like for an intro or something like that.
Yeah, it's not, like, if you look at it in terms of the lighting, what is the lighting highlighting? Where is my attention driven? And my attention is driven to the ships, right?
Yeah, it's all about the ships.
Exactly. They're the color that stands out. It's a very warm background with the cool colors of the jets of these ships and stuff like that. So it's pulling me through the piece and giving me a sense of the mood and atmosphere. However, it doesn't, the lighting isn't drawing my attention to any gameplay area per se, because of the heavy use of texture all over, and that basically. It's not, what I feel when I look at this piece is a feeling of atmospheric immersion, but not necessarily gameplay immersion, right? And I don't necessarily know if this is a game context or a film context, right? It's kind
Absolutely.
Yeah. And how about yourself? How are you feeling?
Yeah, the same way. I was looking on the side to kind of dig up some reference to kind of show kind of the lighting. On the technical side of the things, it could be stronger because the lighting is a bit flat, and then the heavy use of textures across the whole thing also kind of flattens it as well. So you can basically do there is atmosphere in it, and you can tell the the sense of depth in the scene. It could just things could like in terms of over texturing. What I meant is like you could simplify areas. Like you use the use of like haze, fog, and just lighting to kind of simplify the area so you don't have to get so texture heavy on things.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what I can see with this artist is that this artist is very. Who is the artist, by the way? I'm very curious.
I'm sorry. I'm going to bring up the name right now.
Yeah.
Actually, all right. So we have the image here. It's by a Castanox, and what I wanted to show, illustrate by this is a reference that I pointed out that the same lighting, and as Adam you just mentioned, when you go this kind of saturated, what kind of effect does that have on a piece like this?
Yeah. Well, generally speaking, when in the case, in a lot of cases, if you look at a lot of that type of artwork, generally taking the saturation down, actually, in real life, colors aren't that saturated. And if you push saturation a lot, it kind of pulls it away from the realm of the believable a little bit. And that can be, stylistically, it can be very successful, but that's something to take into account. If you're looking for a little bit more of a believable or realistic environment, you might want to take those saturations down a little bit.
Yeah, it almost gets into the realm of like surrealism and stuff.
Yeah, it becomes like cartoons are generally a little bit more saturated, right?
Yeah.
To make a stronger impact. Well, that stylistically can be your signature style. There's nothing wrong with that, but just do be aware that that can have that kind of an effect. It can have that. People can respond to your artwork in a different way because you've pushed the saturations a little bit heavier.
Yeah. And so, with that said, to further improve a scene like this would be to get back really crisp edges. Every building here in the background almost has like a haze around it, like you're looking through like it in a fish tank, or if that makes sense. Like it's just it gets kind of soft and kind of muddled.
Yeah, there's a kind of an effect where you apply a blur, you copy the image, blur it, and then apply it. You set it to lighten, and it kind of creates this kind of hazy glow to everything, which can be visually nice to look at. But what it can do is lose a little bit of definition overall, right? In this particular case, the foreground elements, in a Castanox's image, the foreground elements are sharp and high contrast, and the background elements are a little hazier, which does help push that depth a little bit, which is nice. But as long as the artist is aware of that decision, as long as that's a conscious decision, right?
And then the other reference I pulled, just because this is kind of like a sci-fi vibe, is this one by, where did it go? From Raphael Lacoste here, and this is what I was talking about, simplifying your details. See, like if you guys these large building structures, about the same distance as this, you don't need to like kind of heavy texture, texturify that. It would just simplify it in terms of shape. Let the lighting of the atmosphere kind of dictate its value and color, and then just put in a couple lights. Show somebody's home.
It's a very monochromatic image, and the depth of the scene is established purely through contrast and value, right?
Yep.
In Lacoste's image, at least, and that's it. That's really all you need in that particular context, right? Now, that doesn't. In the case of Lacoste's image, the emphasis wasn't put on a heavy use of color, right? That wasn't the focus. It's more of a monochromatic image to give a kind of a sci-fi feel to it. Whereas in a Castanox's image, it's a little bit more ambitious color-wise. It's a little more daring color-wise, which I commend personally. I think that it takes cojones to do that, right?
Yeah. And then there's two other things I wanted to mention on this one is just unless it's really intentful, like right on, is like you want to avoid putting something directly in the middle like this. Like the piece would be like probably more stronger if this is coming in at a slight angle right about here. This is like a whole dead space, on the image. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was the consistency of scale.
Right.
These kind of windows are working fine here, but then they're next to like these larger ones, like which are next to these ones, which will almost be like miles apart. Like you know what I'm saying? These are just like so large, and then there's just inconsistencies.
Yeah, that's very true. I see that too. Yeah.
So this is something to keep in mind when you're doing the cityscape building in terms of that. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
This one is, I believe, Hill Chavez. Sorry if I butchered your name again, but
Chavez or Chavez?
It's one of those. I got a stupid, I got a horrible American dialect for that, so how am I gonna pronounce that correctly? I take 7 years of like Spanish and stuff. I can't say
Is
anything.
it jalapeno or jalapeno?
Yeah, right. I'm that guy. I said it probably the latter.
Yeah, there you go.
And it just really just over emphasizes my ignorance on the world in general. So we'll just leave it at that.
Don't beat yourself up about it. Yeah.
On this note, this one, this has the consistent sense of scale, and depth and atmosphere again. And I think in terms of that, it was really well executed.
Right. Very well. And I would put this again, where if we're looking at the first one, we're looking at something that is a mood piece, and it puts emphasis on the moment in time where these ships are traveling through. It doesn't necessarily put emphasis on gaming because we can't see any of the game area, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same context with this one as well, where I don't look at it and think game. I'm actually looking at this and think of an establishing shot for a film, right? So we're first introduced to an environment and what's going on, like a scene in James Bond where we see that we're at a soccer riot type of idea. Right?
Yeah, and there's like no really kind of clear-cut focal point because of the lighting and.
Yeah, well, I would look at this, if this was the context of a game, I would be asking myself, because remember, gaming is about immersion. It's about being one of the people.
Yeah.
You're an actual active character in that scene. So if I look at this, I would be asking myself, okay, well, where do I go, right? And I can't answer that question in this piece, although artistically it's beautiful. I can't place myself in there. I'm a casual observer of a scene, right?
Yeah.
I'm a third person here rather than a first person. So... yeah,
and ways to kind of you can improve that and something like that is like, all right, you sold the idea of this crowd, but maybe the way you do the set dressing with the lighting on a scene like this, like, can really dictate everything. Like, you could have there's like equal like light and cool colors kind of distributed throughout this, but you could like really kind of use the tone of the temperature of the colors to really kind of guide the viewer's eye in something like this. And this is just like one example I felt off the side is like, all the streetways and, the kind of, the streetways and the alleys and stuff. They're all kind of like really warm, but it's like, it's got a nice, the cooler tops, you have the sides of the buildings, and then the tops where, if this was like a gameplay level, like people, the player would not be kind of up here. It's kind of focused on the warm kind of like lit paths.
You immediately look towards that tree area at the bottom and think, okay, that's where my journey starts, right? Mm-hmm. And the artist, that's exactly what the artist did. They drew your eye to that spot. It made it the most visually pleasant and highest contrast area, so that your eyes naturally go there and go, I want to go there first, right?
Yep.
You got to answer those questions when you're developing.
And yeah, I definitely like kind of commend him on a scene like this to begin with, because nighttime scenes I find generally are a little bit more challenging. So
yeah.
It's like all the same principles kind of apply, but it's something like similar to this if it loads, but they're definitely kind of difficult to pull off in terms of selling the atmosphere. Like, you might be able to pull like a lighter blue, maybe add a lens flare in here, something like that, to kind of simplify what's going on back here, to draw emphasis in this immediate kind of like dinner party thing, this market scene. But overall, I think it's going in a good direction. So
yeah, very much so, and visually, it's very, very exciting. It's a lot of joy looking at this image. I think something you mentioned about nighttime scenes is it is challenging because we don't see as well at nighttime. However, from a designer's perspective or somebody who's putting together a game, it gives you a lot of versatility and control on where to put your lights to help draw the eye flow, right?
Yep.
So you can have a night scene where everything is pretty obscured and in the dark, but then you have a couple of little pot lights sitting here and there that direct your eye through the scene where you want your audience to look, right?
Yep.
In this particular case, because we have the lights of the buildings and the lights of the marketplace and all of these lights everywhere, our eye kind of get dragged everywhere. And that might not be your intention. Your intention might be to say, I want, the action happens in that marketplace. Well, that means dim everything else down and add those bright lights there instead. You know, take a little bit more control
Yeah.
on where you want people to look specifically.
Like this one, all the sides in the foreground are really kind of dimly lit
Yeah,
and striking. And then, he's selling the idea of going to, the strip down in this scene here.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Your eyes get pulled directly to a specific area, which is what you want, right?
And so, yeah, with that, with it being a city setting, all synthetic, man-made, you can control everything. You can add smoke coming back here, fog. You have like total control of the environment. How you set up the lighting. It's not all natural lighting. Like it would be on a lonely mountain. At night, like you have where it just maybe has the moon. So.
Right. You know, another thing here that I just because it was a little small on the screen when I was looking at it, but there's a character in there. In fact, a principal character on the bottom left, right above the signature. Now, I didn't see that because in terms of value and contrast, he almost gets completely lost. I almost completely didn't see him. But as soon as I noticed him, I went, hey, wait a minute, there's a player in this scene.
Yeah.
Right? Looking over the tank. You would want to throw a light on that guy to make him stand out. So that
or give him like little lights on his, like if you darken all the area around like you did, and just maybe a little emphasize that a little more, but maybe give him like a glowing backpack, with Splinter Cell, he has those the mask, he's got the 3 glowing lights on him, and that's like his part of his immediate read, like it's him, just
his stealth outfit.
Right, with the big glowing freaking neon lights.
Freaking flashlight in the dark, and all of these moron guards are walking around, and they don't just happen to see this green glowing light in the shadow.
Shadow.
I always question that choice. Yeah.
All right, now we have this is Shan's piece.
Yeah, nice.
And I really like this one. He has you could tell he started kind of blending and mixing different architectural styles.
Right.
I think personally, that maybe that dome for his style kind of stands out just a little bit in terms of the rest of these. Maybe I'd have to see another dome, well, there is domes here, and then there's this shape, but maybe give it more of that. I don't know, because I see some Eastern, influences here as well. So I don't know. I think it's in a great start, though.
Yeah, definitely, and even without the color or any light or anything like that. And maybe even due to the fact that we don't yet have color and light, is that we can imagine in this line drawing where the scene can happen, right? We can see the platform on the bottom right of the image. We can see where we can start placing characters in the scene. Now, what you want to do as an artist, like in the game context at least, is decide firsthand where's that action going to take place, right? Mm-hmm. And make sure that the light source emphasizes that, and everything else will not get that same level of contrast or temperature contrast either, right?
Yeah, like if this was like, on the Uncharted games, they could, script, this could be an idea for like one of those chase sequences where the player starts here and he's running down and up the stairs and through here, up on the side of the ledge, up the window, it's just the possibilities are endless on something like this. And I think this is like great for like that first kind of milestone or step in the pipeline where, if this gets approved at this level, they'll tell you to go give it a nice paint job, and then you can almost do, like gradient washes over this to sell. All right, this is nighttime, this is sunset, this is early morning, and you could do like a whole mood board, 4 of them or whatever from this one image really kind of easily, and then take it to a final concept from, whatever gets approved.
Yeah, the hard work and detail is done, and a lot of attention was put towards the graphic design of the scene, the actual but you mentioned something important too. You were mentioning like the dome in the background. For the sake of visual consistency, if you're creating an actual environment that belongs to a certain world, quote unquote, right, you'd want to see a slightly more deliberate repetition of certain elements. So if you're going to throw a dome in there, because that dome is unique to the rest of the scene, you're drawing attention to it, right? People are always looking for contrast. But if you repeat that, take a dome and maybe stick it somewhere in the foreground, you're creating a more deliberate graphic design, and you're creating a little bit more of a visual consistency to it. If you want that dome to stand out, if that's where the destination is, you keep it different from everything else, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I love this though, because he's embellishing, different, parts of the architecture up here,
Yeah.
and then he's making his own designs right here.
Yeah.
He's totally inventing this, like the different types of holes, to go through, and you can put various things down there and configuring the gameplay, like.
Beautifully done.
And then it might ask you to do like a call out of this fountain where you just do a concept piece designing out that fountain and stuff. It might maybe a key scene takes place down here. It's just this really is just like the first page in like a real open book in terms of where you can go with the possibilities. So
you nailed it, because I love, to me, the type of environments that I get drawn to are those secret city things where you feel like a little you have a little your little figurine and you can walk it through that scene and you just feel this real living village type of feel to it. It's very immersive.
Yeah. So I would just great job, and we'll leave it at that. There's not really much to improve or destroy for this point.
Absolutely not. No, it's a beautiful piece of work.
And all right, so now we have Antoine's.
All right, nice.
And
now, I'd say my first reaction out of this is, in terms of game play, this one I can place myself in this scene. You know, in terms of being an actual character in the scene, I can actually. It's a little bit more intimate in terms of character placement. And I can imagine where I would walk around this scene. That's the first, in terms of game context, I think this one nails the game side of things. The most
and it's at nighttime, so it's selling the atmosphere, but you can clearly see, because the blue moonlight, on all the top surfaces where you can move around.
Yeah.
And then, he directs to different key points with the warm light, so.
Yeah.
And I think he made the right move by not going crazy on all this stuff in the background, because this is really this is an emphasis on what's going on right here, and that's really the intent of it. So
it's you can see how important the negative space, the lack of information, can help draw your attention to a certain area. Because as a human being, you want to fill that space, right? Mm-hmm. And you fill it with yourself. So it's a good lesson to be learned in that.
And he's doing the same thing with the architecture. You can kind of tell around. I would just like to see more of this. I mean, this gets a little muddy up in here and stuff, but you can tell he's considering that, and I would just love to see more of it. Really,
yeah, it's a good start. Just keep building on that already established idea to add more visual information to make it a little bit more stimulating visually. Right?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I can see you bust this out, in maybe a couple hours or whatever it takes you, and then they'll mark it up, give you red notes on all this, and then you spend the rest of the afternoon just applying those changes, and there you go.
Yeah.
And that's like a typical day working either kind of like in house or for a contract on what your schedule might be on a typical piece like this.
Yeah, is that a character on the left under the kind of walking under that thing near the
Yes.
door? Okay. Yeah, if you think in terms of perspective and distance, I think the scale's a bit off. I think that character on the left is probably, if you look at the characters on the right compared to the character on the left, there's not enough depth in that perspective to justify that character being that big, unless it's a giant or something like that, right? But just be careful with your scale comparison as well.
Yeah, and that's always tricky to do.
Yeah.
Unless you put marker. I mean, if I had put markers in that original 3D mock-up to begin with, that would kind of help. But overall, I think it's very well. And I would just, if I were the art director on this project, I would just say, kind of plan, give us an indication of what this stonework, what kind of texture this is. This is just a little, too plain Jane for if we're already at the color phase, give me an indication of, the transition between wall and floor, or ground plane, and just stuff like that, and maybe like corner pieces, how they relate to the sides, and frames on just little things like that. You'll get asked to kind of figure out, and that's at the end of the day what this is all about is just problem solving. So that's something to keep in mind.
But the big problem is solved, right? The big problem is, okay, how do I start this design? How do I set up the scene? What type of camera angle do I use? What scale are my characters? Is already done. And that's actually the hard part. After that, it's just you start noodling around and having fun with detail, right? And you want your detail to complement the scene, but don't overcharge it to the point where it kills it, right?
Yep.
You don't weigh it down with too much. You got to keep that negative space there to allow breathing space for the audience to be able to immerse themselves.
Yeah, and that's always a really delicate balance, and
Yeah.
not that my piece is perfect, but I can show an example of that's what I did, and I tried to do in all this the back areas here is
Yeah.
like I didn't want to get any more detailed than adding some of the paint job with the lines, and then but it's just using haze and atmosphere to kind of mask out as much of it as I can.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like I told him, I wanted to figure out what these windows are, what the shapes of the frames, the
Mhm.
difference between, how the paint applies to the bricks here with the wash, and
Yeah.
then, how that's different from the ground, and then just a little bit of the set dressing by these little extra details with, wires, lights as you have, and then whatever kind of textures, I kind of thought of these awnings last minute, but it's like, all right, if I'm going to have an awning here, but what do they look like? How could that fit in with the design aesthetics of the city? So
Right. Exactly. And notice as well, since we're looking at your piece here as well, look at the very deliberate use of light. We know exactly where to look first, right? I guarantee you can show this to 1,000 people, and everybody's gonna look at the first spot at the same time. We're all gonna look at the same spot, which is that area at the bottom where there's a few characters walking around, right? And that's not a mistake. I can ask Tyler, and Tyler's gonna say, oh, "Yes, of course. That's exactly why I did it." Right?
absolutely.
But it's you can tell by looking at this piece that Tyler, speaking to you in the third person, right, decided this ahead of time. Said, okay, this is where I want people to look first, and controlled the attention of the audience by saying everything else is going to be muted out in a bit of darkness and atmosphere, but that area down on the bottom right, on the bottom right, is where I want people to look. That's where the action's happening.
And I arrived at the solution in a really simple way. I just put this whole line of buildings here in the shadows,
right?
And then I have various other kind of cast shadows up in here from who knows what's up here, but it's just it's like I'm a stage director. I just want this part lit. Like we can kind of use a little bit of our artistic licenses to kind of fake that, even though it might not be the most accurate thing.
Oh, fake it. Yeah, absolutely fake it. One of the greatest revelations I ever made, I was working in telecommunications. Don't ask. I was working at Sprint, of all places. And I was sitting there and I was thinking about art, and I went, holy, I can cheat in art, And it was like this I was always trying to follow the rules all the time. And then all of a sudden I realized I can cheat. And all of a sudden, like, a whole new world. And I ran home, I started to paint, I remember that discovery years ago. Yeah.
All right, so for this contest, I'm gonna say that Sean's my favorite one right here.
Yeah, I think that overall that really kind of answers all the questions, both graphically and setting wise.
It's the clearest and most consistent, in terms of overall quality.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that's the best one. Awesome job, man. Yes,
awesome job, beautifully done. All of you guys did an awesome job.
Yes. Yeah. And then all right, so just a few closing comments I wanted to make before we end this one, and we hope we get a lot more, and everyone can keep submitting. We want to keep doing these contests, and if you want Adam and I to kind of give our feedback based off our industry experience on your work, just enter, and the contest is just a means of having a similar theme that we can kind of go off of. So
yeah.
If you're a learning or inspiring concept artist, just please know that it's not a crutch to use photo references or to overpaint 3D stuff. It's not lacking skill either to use line work.
Yeah.
Instead of a stock model that you overpaint. It's just usually better to work smarter, not harder, and to do what's ever efficient for you. Illustration's illustration and concept art is concept art. Just don't confuse the two. With each piece of art, there's different motives and objectives, so keep that in mind.
Yeah. You're problem solving, right? The quickest way you can get that problem solved, the better it is for everybody.
Yep. Time is money.
Time is money.
All right, so see everyone next time. Thanks for entering.
Take care. Thanks.